This bill, Mr. Speaker, seeks to facilitate the provision of advance information relating to cargo and passengers of a conveyance, and to share the information with other states with a view to identifying the cargo and persons that may pose risks to security, while at the same time it is intended to facilitate trade through electronic data interchange and for matters connected therewith. In a manner of speaking, Mr. Speaker, the bill could be considered a companion bill to the Advanced Passenger Information Bill, which was passed several years ago when we were in the midst of the World Cup cricket and matters of security plague the region. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to mitigate the threats emanating from international trade, CARICOM impacts, that is the implementing agency and crime and security, and the member states, including, of course, St. Kitts and Nevis, are moving towards implementing best practice measures as it relates to trading across borders. And one of the best practice measures is really encapsulated in the bill that is now being debated in the House. Mr. Speaker, if we were to turn to Clause 2 of the bill, it defines the meaning of advanced cargo information. And it says, among other things, that the advanced cargo information, abbreviated ACACI, means manifest, airway bill, and bill of lading information or data set out in the first schedule in respect of A, the cargo and stores, including all imports, exports in transit, and the transshipment of goods, and B, any package of which there is no bill of lading or airway bill on board a conveyance. It goes on, Mr. Speaker, to speak to the ACI hit and other matters related to this particular definition of advanced cargo information system. The definition refers, of course, to the first schedule, and it seeks to outline the exact data elements that would be required to be entered or inputted in the advanced cargo information system. What is different to what we are attempting to advance now and what exists now? Historically, I am advised that the Customs and Excise Department, under the Customs Act number 19 of 2014, required the prior notification of arrival. Though this allowed for the submission of a declaration prior to the arrival of the conveyance into the Federation, the legislation did not mandate the data elements for such submissions. So there was a void there. Due to this lack of clarity, the Customs and Excise Department was in certain cases only able to secure the bare minimum information from the manifest declaration. Mr. Speaker, this lack of information has posed a significant challenge for the Customs and Excise Department to be able to identify to a sufficient degree of certainty the threats posed by incoming consignments to the Federation. This in turn has hindered the department in its ability to effectively implement a proper risk management system. The Department has therefore found that the information derived from the manifest system has proven to be inadequate for our contemporary framework and the complex challenges now faced by border control. And of course, this has to do with the importation of illicit goods into the Federation, whether they be drugs, contraband, counterfeit, whatever it is. Those are some now of the security threats which border control all over have to relate to and respond to. Mr. Speaker, the bill proposes to introduce in the first schedule a methodology for the inputting of 104 data elements into the Advanced Cargo Information System. And of the 104 data elements, 71 of them are compulsory. The remainder, of course, would be optional. This means that 68% of the data fields have to be filled in. This is a significant amount of relevant information that would now be made available to better assist the Customs and Excise Department in assessing the risks that each consignment poses to the Federation. Mr. Speaker, when the bill passes, it is anticipated that the information provided by the Advanced Cargo Information System would help to ensure that the Customs and Excise Department would be better placed to protect the Federation and the region from threats emanating from international trade. Mr. Speaker, in Clause 2 of the bill, the expression ACI hit is defined to mean a cargo manifest, airway bill or bill of lading, or any documentation that has been flagged by the Advanced Cargo Information System. This definition is of significant importance to the effectiveness of the bill, since it speaks to elements of a system that would be used to identify these suspicious consignments. So wherever there is a hit so defined, it means that through the regional system, there is some measure of concern regarding the particular cargo, and law enforcement and border control is therefore put on higher alert. Under Clause 2 of the bill, the expression regional space refers to the collective territories of the parties to ACIS, which comprise, in the main, CARICOM member states. This arrangement, Mr. Speaker, therefore hails another important milestone in the process at CARICOM integration, as member states move towards implementing the necessary security arrangements to provide for increased trade among CARICOM states. Additionally, the proposed system highlights the wisdom of member states of CARICOM in recognizing that in order to have sustained success in the fight against transnational crime, we must have a united approach. And in this regard, it's important to note that the bill we are moving to the Parliament now would, in a similar way, be moved through all the parliaments of member states of CARICOM as we move to have a harmonized piece of legislation everywhere, compatible and in sync with each other, so that information can be shared and the same approaches basically are being followed. Mr. Speaker, with this in mind, we are able to appreciate that in this regard, it is not just one nation attempting on its own to secure its borders. It is all the member states of the CARICOM region which are attempting to do so. So in this manner, Mr. Speaker, the forces of integration are saying instead of insularity, we must show solidarity. The forces of integration recognize that the criminals have no respect for our borders, and thus we must have a holistic and unified approach if we want to maintain, in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis, a beautiful country in which peace abounds. Mr. Speaker, it must be remembered that if we are moving towards deeper integration with the intent to encourage greater interregional trade and travel, we must be in a better position to mitigate the threats emanating from not only international but regional trade and travel. Thus, there is the establishment of a watch list as defined in Clause 2, and this list is deemed necessary to track the current activity or movement of criminals and suspicious or prohibited cargo, including terrorists and other persons and cargo of interest to the CARICOM community. We turn to Clause 3 of the bill, which imposes an obligation to provide information. This provision seeks to ensure that there is a mandatory requirement for submission of the advance cargo information as required by the data fields, 104 of them, and these data fields are listed in the first and second schedules. According to Clause 3, the master or agent of the master or every cargo reporter of a conveyance, whether laden or in ballast, shall, prior to arrival of the conveyance in St. Christopher and Nevis, provide to the proper officer, that is, the customs officer so designated, through the ACIS cargo and passenger information detail that are set out in the first and second schedule. The first schedule, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the data fields pertaining to cargo, while the second schedule speaks to data fields pertaining to passengers. This further establishes ACIS as the sole point of submission, and it is expected that ACIS would be fully integrated with what is now known as the ASICUDA system in place in all customs departments within the region. The ACIS would also allow for the electronic submission of all cargo manifests to the regional centralized systems, and that is part of the beauty of it. So the information is simultaneously being shared across member states electronically. The Customs and Excise Department seeks to maximize on the critical experience gained from the AP system. That is the system that deals primarily with advanced information with respect to people. The advanced passenger system introduced useful tools such as a screening process and sharing of security information. These same methods now would be applied to the process of cargo being imported in St. Kitts and Nevis. Clause 3, subsection 2 of the bill recognizes that there may be unforeseen circumstances that may prevent the submission of the required information in advance. And in this regard, it provides for a waiver, and it empowers the Comptroller of Customs to exempt the master of the conveyance from the requirements set out in Schedules 1 and 2. Under Clause 3, Subsection 2, Subsection B of the bill, however, the Comptroller is required to establish alternative notification arrangements for the conveyance. And Subsection 4 of Clause 3 of the bill speaks to a case where a conveyance is forced to make what is referred to as a technical stop. What then are examples of technical stop? The plane, the boat, may be compelled by an emergency to come into the territorial space of St. Kitts and Nevis. And in that regard, this unintended entry into our territorial space for that particular incident, there can be a waiver, and most likely there will be, with respect to the non-supply of the information in advance. Other circumstances which would warrant a waiver would be in the case of accident, unfavorable weather conditions, or other necessity. Mr. Speaker, the bill allows for certain conditions to apply in these cases. And the bill at subsection 5, clause 3, subsection 5, allows for the Comptroller of Customs to waive the requirement for master to provide the advance information as required under subsection 1, and in that regard, Schedules 1 and 2, subject to certain conditions that the Comptroller of Customs would prescribe. And this is in the case of a military or law enforcement aircraft or vessel, special dispensation, and of course, an official state visit. That is, we have heads of states or diplomats. Even in our built-out of the Emergency Powers Act with respect to COVID, there was a special exemption provided for dignitaries, if you will, persons of diplomatic standing entering into the Federation. So that is, of course, is part of the immunity and part of the good governance with respect to which our international relations are being built. Penalty, Mr. Speaker. The penalty for breach of the law are set out in penalties, are set out in clause 4. And in the committee stage, we may make a minor amendment where it says the penalty would be a fine of $30,000 each. And I gather this $30 penalty, $30,000 in penalty, is consistent with Section 18, subsection 5 of the Customs Act now in vogue, that is number 19 of 2014. There is a fine of $30,000, but there also is the incarceration provision. That is, let's go back, imprisonment to a term of 3 years, and we will make a minor insertion when we get there to say a term not exceeding 3 years. So it could be 1 week if you are lucky. It could be 2 years. It could be 2.5 years. It could be up to 3 years. We want to give that discretion to the judicial officials, and so we will just make that minor change later on. Clause 5 of the bill relates to the use of advanced information. A whole lot of information, 104 fields are to be provided to the Controller of Customs. How will this information be used? Had to be used in a safe way, and it has to be used in a manner that respects privacy, etc., and security of data. So Clause 5 of the bill speaks to this particular matter. And in that vein, the information submitted into the ACES system may be disclosed by the Comptroller of Customs, who may disclose or authorize the disclosure of any document or information in accordance with data protection law. And in this Parliament, in our first term, we did bring legislation relating to data protection and data privacy. The Comptroller of Customs can disclose information as required on the laws dealing with electronic crimes and any other relevant law in accordance with treaty arrangements and agreements concluded by the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Clause 5 of subsection 2 speaks to some of the types of information which can be disclosed, and among them are past travel movements, general history, and the modus operandi of specified persons. The pattern of behavior may be helpful to the successful prosecution of a case, and in this regard, this particular legislative enactment makes provision for disclosure. Currency and documents relating to other relevant financial transactions, including money laundering. So we see that the criminal element, the criminal mind, the criminal operations are what the piece of legislation is intending to disrupt by having information being made available to law enforcement in advance of the arrival of the cargo and the arrival of persons or passengers. Information can be provided to assist intelligence analysis, assessments, and reports. And the details about known or suspected involvement in illicit activities become important. The phraseology of illicit actions, illicit actors, came to vogue in St. Kitts and Nevis in May of 2014, when the US government said that the last administration had lost its confidence because that administration, now rejected, was involved with illicit actors and accommodating them. And as a consequence, the United States government blacklisted us. There was an advisory issued by the US Treasury. So we understand what this illicit actors mean and what is the substance of the meaning being conveyed by that designation. Subsection 5 of the bill says, impacts. This is a regional crime and security body established on the treaty arrangement in 2006 shall use the cargo and passenger data to conduct screening against databases and watch lists of cargo, crew members, passengers on the conveyances that enter into, depart from, and move within the regional space. Again, impacts is the entity to which most of this collaboration will basically take place. So what our Customs Department is unable to do, having regard to its own database, we can depend upon the regional system, as we do in all sorts of crime fighting efforts in St. Kitts and Nevis. We collaborate with the regional organization to help us provide information in our fight against crime. And then, Mr. Speaker, it goes on to say how this information will be used and the screening, etc., that will take place by impacts. And in a similar way as it does locally for the Customs and Excise Department, it says basically how these information can be used by the regional entity. The kinds of information will be real-time notification and pre-alerts in respect to threats emanating from international trade, trade in contrabands, trade in drugs, trade in arms and ammunitions. All these are serious threats globally, and St. Kitts and Nevis, as a responsible country and a responsible member of the international community, must play our role. The requirements, of course, are listed, but we point to the need for improvements in trader compliance, which would result in increases in revenue collection. And this is important for us as a government as we pursue law enforcement. It comes with a high cost. In fact, the significant investment we have made across the board in law enforcement in St. Kitts and Nevis, that investment has been at an all-time high. We have invested in every area: the customs, the police, the prisons, the defense force, the fire services. Every area of law enforcement we have invested significantly over the last 5 years, and we continue to do so, because the security of this state must never be taken for granted. Mr. Speaker, I want to move to Clause 6, and Clause 6 speaks to retention of advanced information. And this matter we have had to confront from time to time, even as we pass freedom of information law. How long should information be validly be kept? Because there is a cost to preserving information and in managing the information that is with the government. Clause 6 says that such information will be retained for the period of 7 years from the submission of the information in ACIS, that is the Advanced Cargo Information System. Again, I'm advised that this is consistent with the requirement under Section 99 of the Customs Act number 19 of 2014. Clause 7 relates to the power of the minister, and in this case, the minister with responsibility for customs, the Minister of Finance in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis. The minister is empowered to make amendments to the schedules, and there are 3 in this bill, and to make regulations that may prescribe procedures for the reporting and processing of the cargo information. Mr. Speaker, the 3rd schedule of the bill speaks to data submission time frames, and you will observe that there are different time frames are provided for cargo, moving by air, moving by sea, and moving by road. And of course, we have long-haul traffic and short-haul, and so the times for submission of the information basically take that or those differences into account. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the cost of the ACIS. Mr. Speaker, it is anticipated that this proposed advanced cargo information system would come at no significant cost to the cargo reporters. Cargo reporters would now be able to access the system using a secure web page, and they would not require specialized equipment or software to make submissions into the system. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, cargo reporters, businesses, and consumers would benefit from improved facilitation of legitimate cargo. And at the fulcrum of this, we are attempting to ensure only legitimate cargo enters the territorial space of St. Kitts and Nevis. So cargo reporters would now be able to access the system using the secure web page, etc. And we talk about the improved facilitation of legitimate cargo. This improvement would flow from the expected increase in efficiency of cargo reporting, having one system for submissions from multiple jurisdictions. So once you enter once, you need not enter for each destination you would go. And of course, the anticipated reduction of clearance times by the use of the risk assessment and the improve in the quality assurance. Mr. Speaker, the Advanced Cargo Information System forms a critical part of the World Customs Organization's safe framework of standards and therefore assists participating countries to standardize and harmonize their electronic cargo information, all in support of regional and international trade. Access to regional and international intelligence database, which is what Impacts would provide, through the receipt of real-time notification and pre-alerts, improves the sharing of information between customs departments all over. These improvements in the screening of goods moving across our borders, Mr. Speaker, along with the present screening of passengers and crew, would provide an additional deterrent to international terrorism, transnational organized crime, and those who traffic in illegal narcotics, firearms, and ammunition. This would no doubt result in the improvement of the safety and security of citizens, residents, and visitors alike. And we could well relate to that in the context of the prior years, of the frequency in which we had incidents involving guns, in the certain knowledge that we are not a producer of guns and therefore they had to be coming in from elsewhere. We could well appreciate that every gun that law enforcement takes from off the street, that makes our country safer. And it is a safer and stronger future to which we are pledged. Mr. Speaker, these improvements in our levels of safety and security would not come at the expense of trade facilitation. On the contrary, I'm advised that ACES would improve trade facilitation. It would achieve this by allowing the Customs and Excise Department to better separate high-risk and low-risk cargo consignments, thus allowing for faster releasing times for legitimate cargo and increased detection of high-risk goods. Further, Mr. Speaker, the system should also allow for the potential increase in revenue collection through improvements in trader compliance and reporting. We spoke about the 104 data fields in the bill that is before us. a significant number of the data elements are with respect to declared values and seal details, 14 of them, enumerated number 66 to 79. We have value freight code, prepaid or collect indicator of the value code, the amount for the value code, the currency code, the customs value of goods, the customs currency code, the insurance costs of the goods, insurance currency code, overall freight costs, overall freight currency, etc., etc. When this information is provided in advance, the Customs Department have a more reliable basis on which to judge the valuation that people are putting on goods. Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, there are actors who will buy at one price and report at another price. And the Customs Department have to use their own independent judgment in attempting to ascertain what is the true value of the goods being brought into the country. The ACE system, by requiring these bits of data to be inputted in advance and showing the valuation given for insurance from supplier, etc., makes it less possible, not impossible, for people to hide their true value. So when people bring in goods and they have one price for customs and one price for something else, we are able to go through this in advance. And we are going to be able to at least slow it down. We are going to be able to bring the full force of the law in relation to a number of entities in the country that we suspect and we are investigating with respect to the under-invoicing of cargo, denying the country a legitimate source of its revenue, and denying the country of the opportunities for these legitimate revenues to be applied in the upliftment of our people. So in closing then, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we are moving ahead with this regional effort at improving the security situation within the region, not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, through this particular piece of legislation. But it's more than just security. It is more than just preventing unauthorized cargo, contraband, counterfeit products into our territorial space. It's also about ensuring that we have the facilitation of business in the country. It's also about our being able to efficiently process cargo leaving and coming into St. Kitts and Nevis by utilizing well-established risk assessment measures. And importantly, for those of us who have to watch the national purse, is that we must avoid leakages in revenues that are intended and should be going into the treasury of the country. So I want to wish this bill safe passage to the Parliament. I want to commend Comptroller of Customs, Mr. Butler, for his fine leadership so far of the Customs Department, to thank his senior officers who have come out in support of the bill. I gather that they have read it in advance. It's an advanced information, cargo information bill, and so they should have read it already, that like their counterparts elsewhere within CARICOM, they give their fullest support. So again, Mr. Butler and your High Command, I want to thank you all for your work, to encourage you to continue to be the best border control officers anywhere in the world. May God bless you. and may God bless our Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.